Wichita, Kansas, the heartland of America, a place where life moved at a slower pace, where neighbors knew each other by name. It was a community where trust was a given, and the idea of locking doors seemed almost unnecessary. Children played freely in the streets, and families gathered for barbecues on warm summer evenings. It was a picture-perfect slice of Americana. But beneath the surface of this idyllic town, a darkness lurked. A darkness that would shatter the peace and tranquility of Wichita, leaving its residents in a state of perpetual fear. The kind of fear that makes you double-check your locks at night and look over your shoulder when walking alone. Dennis Rader, a seemingly ordinary man leading an ordinary life, a family man, a church council president. He was the kind of person you would trust to watch your house while you were on vacation, the kind of person who would lend a helping hand without a second thought. He was a husband, a father, and a respected member of the community. No one suspected he was hiding a sinister secret. For 17 years, Rader terrorized Wichita as the BTK killer. He was a master of deception, blending seamlessly into the fabric of everyday life while committing unspeakable acts of violence. His ability to lead a double life was nothing short of chilling. Bind, torture, kill, his chilling calling card, a chilling acronym that sent shivers down the spines of residents. It was a methodical and calculated approach to murder that left investigators baffled and the community paralyzed with fear. Each crime scene was a macabre puzzle, meticulously crafted to instill terror. He vanished in 1991, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a city forever scarred. The sudden cessation of his crimes was as mysterious as the man himself, leading many to wonder if he had died, moved away, or simply decided to stop. The uncertainty only added to the community's unease. His victims, seemingly chosen at random, came from all walks of life. They were men and women, young and old, each with their own stories and dreams. The randomness of his selection process made everyone a potential target, heightening the sense of vulnerability among the residents. Joseph and Julie Otero, their two young children. Catherine Bright, a young woman with a bright future ahead of her. Shirley Vian, a mother trying to protect her children. Nancy Fox, Maureen Hedge, Vicki Wegerle, and Dolores Davis. Each name represents a life cut short, a family left to grapple with unimaginable loss. 10 innocent lives extinguished, leaving behind families shattered, and a community living in fear. The impact of his crimes rippled through Wichita, turning a once tight-knit community into a place of suspicion and dread. The sense of safety that once defined the town was irrevocably lost. Who was this monster hiding in plain sight, and what drove him to commit such horrific acts? These questions haunted the residents of Wichita for years. The duality of Dennis Rader's existence, his ability to be both a loving family man and a cold-blooded killer, remains one of the most perplexing aspects of his story. What twisted motivations lay behind his actions? Was it a desire for power, control, or something even more sinister? The enigma of BTK continues to captivate and horrify, a dark chapter in the history of a town that we'll never forget. Dennis Rader didn't stalk the dark alleys or seedy underbellies of Wichita. Instead, he chose the serene and seemingly safe streets of suburbia. The quiet neighborhoods with their manicured lawns and white picket fences were his preferred hunting grounds. These were places where families felt secure, where the illusion of safety was a comforting blanket that masked the lurking danger. He found his victims in the most unassuming of places, their own homes. These were homes filled with laughter, love, and the everyday routines of suburban life. The very places where people felt most at ease, where they let their guard down, became the stage for his sinister acts. The open windows and unlocked doors were silent invitations to a predator like Rader. He preferred the quiet normalcy of suburbia, where families felt safe, where children played in the streets without a care in the world, and where neighbors greeted each other with friendly waves. It was this sense of normalcy that made his actions all the more terrifying. The contrast between the peaceful exterior and the horror he brought was stark and chilling, where doors were often left unlocked. In these neighborhoods, trust was a given, and the idea of locking doors seemed almost unnecessary. This trust was something Rader exploited to its fullest. He knew that in these quiet streets people felt invincible, and it was this false sense of security that he shattered with his presence. This was his hunting ground, his playground of terror. The empty streets at night, the darkened houses, all provided the perfect backdrop for his malevolent plans. He thrived in the shadows, moving silently and unseen, a ghostly figure that brought nightmares to life. He meticulously studied the routines of his victims, learning their schedules, their habits. He was a patient predator, taking his time to understand every detail of their lives. He knew when they woke up, when they went to bed, and every moment in between. His notes were detailed, his observations precise. He'd watch them from afar, a ghost-like presence, noting when they left for work, when they returned, and when the house was empty. His surveillance was relentless, and he left nothing to chance. Every movement, every action was recorded in his mind, building a complete picture of his prey. When the kids were at school, when the house stood vulnerable, he knew the exact moments when the house was most exposed, when his victims were at their most defenseless. These were the moments he waited for, the moments when he could strike with precision and without warning. He'd scout their neighborhoods, looking for escape routes, for places to hide, for the perfect moment to strike. His knowledge of the area was extensive, and he used it to his advantage. He knew every alley, every hidden corner, and every possible escape route. His planning was meticulous, his execution flawless. For the perfect moment to strike, he was a master of timing, waiting for the exact right moment to make his move. His patience was unnerving, his ability to remain unseen, uncanny. He could wait for hours, days, even weeks until the moment was just right. His knowledge of Wichita's layout, its parks, its back roads, was uncanny. He had studied the city in detail, learning every street, every park, every hidden path. This knowledge gave him an edge, allowing him to move through the city with ease and confidence. He knew the city like the back of his hand, using its anonymity to his advantage. He could disappear into a crowd, blend into the background, and become invisible. His ability to move unnoticed was one of his greatest strengths, allowing him to strike and then vanish without a trace. He could blend in, disappear into the background, a phantom in broad daylight. His presence was like a shadow, always there but never seen. He was the unseen terror, the invisible threat that haunted the quiet streets of suburbia. Dennis Rader didn't choose his victims randomly. Oh no, his motives were far more calculated, far more chilling. He had a type, a profile, a macabre checklist that he followed with disturbing precision. He sought out specific victims who fit his twisted fantasies, adding another layer of horror to his crimes. Single women living alone, young couples starting families, even entire households. He targeted those he perceived as vulnerable, those who he believed wouldn't put up a fight, those who would become his ultimate puppets. The more vulnerable, the more they fit his twisted criteria, the more enticing they became. He relished the power he held over their lives, the knowledge that he, and only he, decided their fate. He meticulously planned each attack, each detail meticulously crafted to fulfill his dark desires. Section 4. The Stalking a Patient Predator. Rader was the epitome of patience, a predator content to wait for the opportune moment. Weeks, months, even years could pass as he stalked his victims, meticulously studying their every move, their every habit. He became a phantom in their lives, an unseen observer, learning their routines with unnerving accuracy. He'd sit in his car, parked down the street, binoculars pressed against his eyes, a chillingly ordinary man on an unordinary mission. He'd watch their comings and goings, noting their routines, their schedules, their vulnerabilities. He'd record his observations in notebooks, detailing their lives with disturbing precision. He documented their daily activities, their habits, their visitors. He knew when they left for work, when the kids went to school, when the house stood empty and vulnerable. He learned their routines better than they knew them themselves. Section 5. The Approach, a Knock at the Door. The most terrifying aspect of Rader's crimes was the chilling normalcy of his approach. He wouldn't break in, wouldn't force entry. He'd simply knock on the door, a disarmingly ordinary man with a sinister purpose. Sometimes he posed as a repairman, a delivery driver, even a police officer. He used disguises, fake IDs, and props to gain the trust of his victims, lulling them into a false sense of security. He'd flash a badge, offer a friendly smile, and just like that, he was invited inside. He understood the power of authority, the inherent trust people placed in uniforms and official-looking documents. He exploited this trust, manipulating his victims with a chilling blend of charm and deception. Section 6. The Control, a Web of Terror. Once inside, Rader's true nature would emerge. He'd overpower his victims, using his physical strength and cunning to subdue them. His approach was methodical, almost ritualistic, as if he derived a perverse satisfaction from the process itself. Binding them, often using household items like rope, which he meticulously prepared in advance. Each knot was tied with precision, each binding material chosen for its effectiveness in restraining his victims. Wire, even pantyhose. He controlled their every move, ensuring they were completely immobilized. The choice of materials was not random. It was a calculated decision to maximize their helplessness, their every breath. He would isolate them from the outside world, creating an environment where they felt utterly alone. The isolation was both physical and psychological, cutting them off from any hope of rescue. Cutting phone lines, disabling cars, ensuring that no means of escape or communication was available. He meticulously planned these actions, knowing that each step increased his control over his victims, turning their homes into prisons of fear. He derived pleasure from their terror, feeding off their panic and despair. The more they struggled, the more satisfaction he seemed to gain, their helplessness. He would torment them, not just physically but mentally. His methods were designed to break their spirit, to make them feel completely powerless, playing mind games, stretching out their ordeal, making them question their reality. Time became a weapon in his hands, each passing second a reminder of their dire situation, making them believe they had a chance, a fleeting moment of hope that he would cruelly snatch away. This psychological manipulation was a key part of his control, making his victims' suffering even more profound, a glimmer of hope before he'd crush it right before their eyes. He controlled their every move, their every thought, their every breath. His victims were trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape, their every breath. His victims were nothing more than pawns in his twisted game, objects to be manipulated, controlled, and ultimately discarded. He reveled in the power he held over their lives, the knowledge that he, and only he, decided their fate, controlled and ultimately discarded. He reveled in the power he held over their lives, the knowledge that he, and only he, decided their fate. This sense of absolute control was intoxicating to him, a dark addiction that drove his actions, the knowledge that he, and only he, decided their fate. His victims were left to wonder if anyone would ever find them, if anyone would ever know the horrors they endured. The fear of the unknown, the dread of what might come next, was a constant torment. And for Rader, this was the ultimate thrill, the final piece of his twisted puzzle.